Fairfield, Fairfield, how far art thou, Fairfield? We have Frank Cenatori, we have Will Gunn. How much better does it get than this? I'm asking, how much better does it get
Well,
than
it
this?
could get better, I suppose.
It can't get better at all. That's what it is. Welcome to another exciting, wonderful, whatever you want to fill in the blank adventure of Fairfield 2.0. And we have got, like I said, Frank Cenatori and Will Gunn. Will Gunn, of course, of being with Van and the Movers, and Frank Cenatori being Bruce Springsteen. But we'll get to the and much more. We'll get to that in a few minutes. I want to start with Will. Will, I've seen you in so many. You back up everybody in town. You're one of those musicians. You're the utility player.
Well, I'd say probably George Foster has me beat these days as far as on bass.
Well, you guys keep a record of this stuff.
No.
But I did. But it was fun. It's fun always seeing you guys jump and doing like tag team. I've seen you done tag team a couple of times with him.
Yeah.
So how is the state of bass playing here in Fairfield these days?
Well, oh boy, what a question.
Not a real question, you realize.
Well, I can only speak for myself. I just try to keep the groove happening, and that's basically that.
And that's the mission. Mm-hmm. And that's the bass player's mission. Just make sure it feels good. Make sure there are some low notes in there.
That's right.
And always be aware of that drummer.
Mm-hmm. Well, I try, my personal mission is, I look at what I do is the attempt of trying to make everyone else sound better than they really are.
Oh, that's sweet. That's sweet. Now, we had an adventure together, I believe.
That's right. Yeah.
I was pretending to be Bobby Darin one night, and you were playing the bass, and it was that was a sweet experience.
Pretending to be Ray Brown or something like that.
You were great. That was a really fun experience. That's one of my best musical adventures here in Fairfield. Are you now Van and the Movers? Mm-hmm. Like I said, Van and the Movers. You're like a staple. You're one of the staples of Fairfield. One of the bands like.
Well,
Jefferson County, but I mean, you're one of those bands everybody thinks of when they think of Fairfield.
Well, I guess it's just a matter of longevity. We've been at it now since, well, I don't know if you were around when Ragbri came through town, and I believe it was August of '97. That was our very first gig.
Wow.
So it's coming up on 16 years now.
How did the band come together?
Well, it essentially, the lead singer, Bob Van Nostrand, and the now departed guitarist Jeff Verdarmel had been working together on various music projects for several years, and when I had returned to Fairfield in the summer of '95, Jeff called me up and basically recruited me for what at that point was a basement jam thing on classic blues tunes. And I was extremely impressed with Bob's singing, and Jeff and I'd worked with on and off for years and years anyway, and so it all just kind of went from there. We essentially holed up in Bob's basement for what amounted to being about 2 years. And then the Ragbri came through town in, I believe it was August of '97, and we got what amounted to being a very impromptu gig that evening in a parking lot of what was then a pet store on 3rd and Burlington. It was a block party, essentially. It was being put on by this woman who owned a pet shop adjacent to the parking lot. Yeah. That was our debut gig. It all kind of went from there, and well, here we are still doing the same thing.
That's really cool. Now, for this next Ragbri, are you going to do another impromptu? The pet shop's gone, but we've got everybody's parking lot.
We just very well might show up in some parking lot.
But now, I know that sounds facetious, and it may even sound a little condescending. I'm not meaning it to be, because we're going to have so many people in this town. It's almost like no matter where you go, you're going to be seen by thousands of people.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm sure we're going to turn up somewhere.
What is the guesstimate of the people that are supposed to be about 10,000 or something?
I'm not sure.
Well, I haven't heard of it.
Yeah, it's really an amazing thing to think that Fairfield would have that many more people. It's doubling the population.
Right. Yeah.
Right. What got you into bass?
Well, to be perfectly honest, it was the spring of 1965, and I was 15 years old at the time, which gives away my age, and anyway, there was a little teenage rock and roll band playing in somebody's backyard, and I just happened to go over, and the bass player had a shiny new Gibson electric bass, and I just thought it was the coolest thing, the coolest object I had ever seen in my life.
We're going to get into the instruments part. Oh,
yeah.
I mean, amazing with this.
I didn't have any idea what the heck a bass did musically or whatever, but this object was just so cool looking that I just wanted in on that energy, and it all kind of went from there.
And this is before Flying V's. So had you seen a Flying V, you might have wanted to.
Well, actually, that came before that even. That was as far back as 58.
That's right. That's right. As far as its popularity.
Right. Oh, well, true.
Was there ever a Flying V bass?
Good question.
I think, well, not back then, no. I think that came later, maybe.
But there was that got another one for
Oh,
me?
yeah.
A musician to musician.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that got you into it, and then you've been playing in various bands, I guess, over the years.
Yeah, pretty much.
And lived happily ever after.
Well, supposedly.
No, Vanna gets together. How often do you guys get together now?
Well, typically, once a week, unless somebody's sick or something like that. We'll get together in Bob's basement, which has been the classic hangout from day
Bob's
one.
basement. Yep.
That's right.
Are you? Do you have any gigs lined up?
Well,
I know you're going to be playing the Square at some point.
I'm not sure. Nothing's said at this point.
Seems like a tradition with
Now,
you guys.
we did play the Capitol Theater in Burlington this last Saturday.
Oh my gosh!
We were actually headliners of a concert that they threw, and there was an opening act, even, believe it or not.
What was the concert?
It was their band and our band. That was it. It was a night of blues, and the turnout wasn't exceptionally great, but the audience enjoyed themselves thoroughly, and as a result, so did we.
Nice.
And then now the next gig we have, things are a little thin at the moment, I'll admit. We're playing, I think it's August 4th or August 11th at a blues club in Pomeroy, Iowa, which is about 3.5 hours north of here on a Sunday afternoon, no less, from 5 to 9.
Wow.
I tell you, we get the major venues.
No, but you know what I was going to say? Iowa is a tricky place because there are I don't know personally because I haven't gone out and done the touring.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of places you can play in Iowa, and because of the different towns.
Oh, yeah.
I'm still trying to get a grip on what the towns are. And then once you get a grip on what the towns, then you know what the venues are. But I'm always amazed because forgive me for this, Fairfield and beyond, but my evaluation still to this day, at least psychologically, is that it's Fairfield, and then it's 218 to Iowa City, or 34 and all the adjacent things that happen to Des Moines. And sure, there is Mount Pleasant, there's Ames, there's there are a couple of other places, Burlington.
Your Iowa perception is limited
that's exactly right.
to a certain geography.
Absolutely. Yes. So I don't get the concept. I don't get the impact. I don't get the impact of there being like a really musical. This is a really cool musical state, and but it's on such a non. It's more like Iowa's like, yeah, we're musical, yeah, so. As opposed to we are Iowa music, which some of the kids are doing, of course.
That's just it. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole thing happening now with original music. Like Adrian Dowler's involved in the whole Ames music scene, for example. There's something really happening.
Nate, yeah.
I more or less grew up in Cedar Rapids for the most part.
Don't you?
And in the 60s, there was a vibrant, happening music scene there. It was amazing. There were like 3 different jazz clubs, a couple of different blues clubs. Yeah. Rock and roll. There was a dance hall called Danceland Ballroom that was upstairs of a bowling alley, and virtually every British invasion band, with the exception of the Beatles and the Stones, played there. And
Cedar Rapids.
It was amazing.
Well, I mean, of course,
we caught the Yardbirds, the Kinks, the Hollies.
And Cedar Rapids does have.
Yeah, I mean, passing through
historical
town, the Animals. It was amazing. So it was really a great place to be at that time. It was amazing.
Yeah. When did you move to Fairfield, and what got you here?
Well, I was originally in April of '82, 31 years ago, and I've broken parole a few times, and now I'm back. And,
No, you'll have to come back. Exactly. It is the Hotel California, Fairfield. It can be.
That's true.
Sure. Yeah.
Now, what is it, Frank? Speaking of, we've got very many things in common. One is New Jersey roots,
yes,
and also our love of Springsteen.
Yes.
And funny, I mentioned that. Weren't you the lead singer, host of the Springsteen events that happened a couple of years ago?
Yes.
That was that was a really sweet.
It was really
event.
fun, yeah.
And actually, that wasn't a couple of years ago. That was just a year ago. January or February, right?
Something like that, yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Oh,
That was the last concert that I remember just the sort of the theme where everybody just wanted to be a part of it as far as the musicians in town. Now I know that the same thing is happening with the Neil Young event,
Right.
But you had such a pivotal role, an important role in that, and you've done other things too. You participated in other musical events. I know a lot of them are associated with Crew because of the Jimmy Moore connection.
Right.
But
Well, there was the Motown R&B show.
and you were front and center on that one too, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Where did you get that voice, first of all?
I just always loved to sing. I mean, and just always enjoyed it, even when I was a kid, and kind of stuck with it. And it was one of my favorite things to do, and continues to be.
Did you sing along with records?
Yes, I did.
Is that how you learned to sing?
Yes.
What were those records? Some of them.
Most of them were the early Beatles records, and I was
Yeah.
a big fan of
Did
the
you-
Beatles and loved their songs.
Did you have any? Were there any? Were there any artists that you like identified with as in I want to be that guy?
Well, in the early days of being involved with music and guitar playing, I mean, I got into Buddy Holly. I just loved everything Buddy Holly did, and I wanted to be Buddy Holly,
Beautiful.
And it was just such a cool story of him, and of course, loved John Lennon and George Harrison of the Beatles all through their career, and after the Beatles, was a big fan of George Harrison.
I lost an opportunity to get employment based on in this one place, Backstage Magazine. I went there for a gig once, I think in the early '80s. I lost the opportunity because I was asked by these two jocks. They were like hockey playing jocks. They were hanging out. They said, "Who do you like better, Lennon or McCartney?" And I said, George Harrison. Never got a call back. Crickets. Stupid answer. But it was the right answer.
Right.
George Harrison was
Yeah.
sort of one of my favorite artists of all time, like even on his own.
Yeah.
You look at with George Harrison, you look at the catalog that he left behind, and you forget how creative he was.
Yes.
He of course he's had like 2 or 3 jump starts, during his solo career that I really appreciated every single one of them. The one in the beginning of My Sweet Lord and all that, of course, and
Right.
that whole period right after post Beatles, and then you have the, I think it's a silly record, but it really was was awesome that he had one of the great videos, one of the early videos with the Crackerbox Palace, and then that was another moment, and then in the '80s he had another couple of resurgence based on Lethal Weapon. Theme. He had a couple of things like that out there. And my favorite, it is a kind of funny thing, was the later years George Harrison music. Here Comes the Moon. I love that song, and I was always waiting for him to do some medley of Here Comes the Sun and Here Comes the Moon. I wanted that to exist. It never happened. Okay, enough about that. You became a songwriter at a certain point. You started writing songs.
Yes.
When did that happen?
I can't remember a time when I wasn't writing songs, so it was probably early when I started learning the guitar and got to where I could play 3 or 4 chords well, that I started writing songs. And
Acoustic guitar or electric guitar?
I started on acoustic guitar, yeah. Before I played guitar, I played drums in high school, so.
Very cool. Brothers, you sisters? You have
I have one brother who's older, and he wasn't musically involved, but.
your best friend? I mean, you were jamming with somebody.
Yeah, I mean, I always had friends in school that somehow we'd find each other and have similar musical tastes, and that's kind of how I picked up guitar, because I was playing drums in high school, and the guitar player friend had, lived with his brother in an apartment, and that was kind of cool. No parents over seeing them, and he had, and so he had his electric guitars there, and when we were done practicing, I would just pick up the guitars and try to do what he was doing, and then soon after decided I wanted to play the guitar.
Do you remember what the name of your first song was?
Oh gosh, because there's so many.
It's kind of funny, isn't it? It's like I thought about that the other day, and I realized, well, I'm not going to say the title because it's so reflective of somebody who's an adolescent and what they would write a song with that title.
I could tell you the name of my first band.
Oh, what's the name of your first band?
People of Time.
That's a great name.
And the initials were.
Oh, I fell right in it. I didn't.
So we loved it.
Both the name and.
Yes. Yep.
What? It's of its era. I have to. I also wanted to ask you with your songwriting and with your learning how to play guitar. Did you ever reach a point where it's like you wanted to do this professionally?
Yeah, I mean, I played music in bands for a living for years.
There you go.
But not as a sole songwriter or a songwriter, just as a playing in dance halls and doing shows and
Well, that's
rock
it.
bands.
And I could have phrased the question a little better. It was that's the question.
Yeah, I spent about maybe 4 or 5 years where I just did music full time.
Yeah, nice. You were lucky, and you know how rare that is. Most people don't get to make music and support themselves with that.
Yeah, and it was
so cool.
It was a great time, and had the opportunity to play with some really good musicians.
And who might they be, Frank?
Well, when I was in New Jersey, there was a lot of guys who, a couple ended up here and then in and out, like a lot of people. Barry Nadler, we were talking about earlier, is a great guitar player and a good friend from New Jersey, and we played in bands, that played full time, and that was our livelihood for several years. Yeah.
Nice. Did you also, now, of course, we're going to have to get into the Springsteen thing. I know we touched on it lightly earlier, but my love of Springsteen happened when I grew up in New York, but then I got to spend some time in New Jersey. I lived with my mentor and his family who were in Pottersville, New Jersey, and I had gone to, I won't go into detail, but I went to a college where everybody was Springsteen crazy. And that was sort of my first experience. My first love of Springsteen comes from Wild Innocent and the E Street Shuffle as opposed to Born to Run, which is how a lot of people kind of entered that zone. It was more like West Side Story. I almost, maybe it's possible that I related to it more because it didn't matter so much with what his lyrics were, but that the fact that it felt so much like Tin Pan Alley. It had more of that kind of feel, like the last song, "Listen to Your Junk Man." He's listen, Trash Man. Sorry. That stuff is like, and Sandy I knew from the Hollies. That was my first introduction to becoming aware of Bruce Springsteen, was because the Hollies had Sandy. And I really, really wanted Sandy to be a hit because they played it on WNEW. I'm sure you got WNEW where you were.
Yep.
So they played it pretty much nonstop. Mm-hmm. And then they would play, and then they played they played something called Another Night, which was the follow-up single. So my feeling is what happened was, they jumped when they saw that it wasn't going to be a top 10 record, and this is the group that I think previously had The Air That I Breathe as their last big record, and they were trying to follow it up. I think probably what happened was they wanted to get onto the disco or the dance-ish song, and they abandoned the promotion on Sandy way too soon, and I was like, what are you doing? That's like a great record. But that got me into Springsteen, and then I did a little research as far as his albums, but weirdly, I owned a couple of them, and I just never listened to them until I got to Jersey and until my friends made me. It was like an influence thing. Everybody was listening, so I had to know. And I remember one of my fondest memories is going to a concert. This isn't going to sound like a fond memory, but I was in Tampa. I think it was 80 or 81. And it was the tour for the River. It was a tour for the River, and we ended up waiting all night, online for tickets. Me and a group of people, including my boss, who I was working for. He had a gift shop, so we were online. And at about 7:30 in the morning, there started to be this major. Everybody's waking up, and there was this major push, like a shove towards the ticket buying offices. And this is Tampa, so all of a sudden it was like the National Guard had come out. There were like 30 police there with the shields, the see-through shields, and billy clubs, and they started whacking kids. And it was like, okay, I'm out. I had a fun time last night, though. That was really great.
Crowd control for concert tickets.
For concert tickets, but it was a Springsteen concert. And at that time, we forget how fanatical.
Yes.
He was really, I can't think of anybody who had that kind of charisma where people, it isn't like you wouldn't do that for your favorite band. Right. But this was a different kind of thing. This was like follow the leader. He really had so much to say in his lyrics, and people identified with it so much. And they believed in him. Yeah. He probably could run for politics, and he probably would have had an office. But that was an amazing period to watch him, to watch that growth and that huge jump, and then to see it again in 84 when Born in the USA came out, right? Which made total sense. It makes sense. That would have been the type of the next level of what was going on then. But it was almost a religious experience. I don't know how you.
Well, it was interesting how I first heard Springsteen, because I'd sort of known that he was around and stuff, but hadn't gotten into him or really listened to his albums or anything. But I started dating a girl who was a big Springsteen fan, and right around that time, she had gotten tickets. He was playing at the Meadowlands. He apparently had 10 shows at the Meadowlands that sold out in like an hour or something.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah. What year was that?
I don't remember what year it was, but it was sometime in the 80s.
Okay.
Yeah, and so
I remember those concerts.
Yeah.
I did go to one of
yeah.
those.
So imagine, I mean, you got to imagine not really ever really listening to his albums or anything, and then just going to a concert. You know, she said, "Oh, Springsteen's great, and you got to come
So
and
that
hear
was
his
your
show."
indoctrination?
That was my indoctrination. I actually go into the concert, and his band comes out, and just like from the first note, and his voice is just amazing. Just I was an instant fan. And one of the interesting experiences, you know, after the first song is over, the whole crowd's going, "Bruce," and when you're not used to that, it sounds like they're booing, and I'm like, "Well, what's wrong? I thought it was great." And then the gal says, "No, they're saying Bruce," and it's like, I mean, it wasn't just that. I mean, it's the whole place is like vibrating with Bruce, and it's like, you know, 10,000 people all chanting Bruce in a deep voice, you know, all at once, and it was like,
what an amazing period! What an amazing time! I love and I also love the fact that he would do 2 to 3 hour concerts.
yes,
You weren't out of there for 2.5 to 3 hours.
yeah, and he'd
Two
play
was
all,
short.
and it was cool because he would play all his tunes and some new tunes, and then at the end he'd come back and play like old Beatles songs and old 60s rock songs and Buddy Holly songs, and
Although I could have lived without. I mean, every time I went to, and I've since seen him a lot of times, and there was a period where it's like, okay, stop with the devil with the moon, stop. But he was so great. You know, even these days, I saw a concert. I think my last one, which I think might have been my 20th time I've seen him, was in the Forum in just a few years ago, and I was amazed by the guy who's now, you know, he's older than I am, and he's still running around, you know, killing, and he can run around a stage like effortlessly, all that. I felt so badly for him. Remember when he played the Super Bowl? And he did that slide into the camera, and it literally slammed into his groin. It was like, oh no, Bruce! Oh, poor Bruce! 50, you know, all these billions of people watching this moment. But he continues to be, to me, he continues to be, you know, the boss.
yeah.
It's an amazing thing. But not too far behind was Southside Johnny.
Yes, that's
Asbury
right.
Jukes.
Yep.
Did they mean anything to you too? Did you look into them after you got into Bruce? Maybe?
Well, yeah, I mean, at the time, one of the jobs I had when my band wasn't playing is I rented sound systems to bands. And quite often I'd get called in to do a job at Stone Pony. And I'd bring in my sound system for some local band or something. And one night their horn section came in and jammed with a band, and I was like, wow, these guys are amazing, and I got to start listening to them. So I did follow them a little bit after that. But
nice. What were your favorite? We'll just not favorite Southside Johnny. That's hard.
Yeah.
No, the Springsteen. What are some of your favorite? You played so many. You sang so many that night.
I know.
What are a couple of your favorites out of that whole catalog?
I don't know, you know.
Is it possible to have any?
I know. 10th Avenue Freeze Out is just such a fantastic, you know, all the songs from there, and you know,
to this day,
I Love the River, and you know,
yeah,
and all those songs.
My favorite, you know, from that period, with the River album, my favorite, Independence Day. I love that song, and it almost never gets get any kind of love.
Yeah, there's definitely one thing about him is just there's so many great, fantastic songs.
I know, Where Do You Go?
Yeah.
And then, of course, when Tracks came out, and some of that stuff that we had really never heard of, and it had never come out on bootlegs. Of course, some of us collected bootlegs too at the time. I don't know who that might be, but I had a ton of that stuff, and I couldn't. It was great that they did that because I had most of the boots in one place. What I've always wanted to have, what I really always wanted to have was, and Legacy can do this. Legacy, Sony, they're the best at this. Universal, I think, is second. But what Legacy did was they ripped off, Legacy meaning Sony Records, Sony Music, Sony Entertainment. They ripped off Universal. When I was over there, we did a series called Deluxe Editions, which we would take an album and then expand it with everything we could find, kitchen sink. Over at Sony, they do the same thing. They called it the Legacy Edition, which is cool because the name of the company is Legacy. And with Springsteen, you could do Born in the USA with all of the B-sides, with all of the music that didn't make that record. You could do that with every one of his albums, I think, after maybe River and on. I'm not sure you could. Oh, no. You could do that with Darkness at the Edge of Town. That's where he over-recorded. I think that's where that kind of began, in my opinion. But enough about Springsteen.
Yes.
But before we leave Springsteen, you got a Springsteen story or something? Do you have a love for this guy too?
Well, to be perfectly honest, I really haven't listened that much to him. I mean, the little I've heard here and there, I appreciate a lot. But to be perfectly honest, I'm not a big music listener, which drives some people crazy. How can that possibly be? You're a musician. Well, for me, it's a participator sport rather than a spectator sport.
Yeah.
And it's like, if I'm not doing it, it's kind of like it's just not there, in my awareness for the most part.
Yeah, that's how I've gotten in trouble over the years with like sports. I like playing them, and it's very hard for me to like keep statistics up on like players and stuff. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But you have a couple of kids, a couple of boys.
Yes.
Do they follow in Pop's footsteps as far as music?
Not exactly the way I did, but for instance, my 12-year-old is kind of likes the rap music, and
it's their way in,
right? Yeah,
He's liking the rap music,
and it's what's interesting about them, which is similar to what I did in terms of following bands and listening to them and learning about them stuff is, they're into video games, as a lot of kids are, which we didn't have so much when we were their age, of course. Yeah. But one of the things.
We had Pong.
Yeah, right. But one of the things they do now,
2600.
which I discovered and is very bizarre to me, but I realize that the way they do it is similar to the way I kind of was into music, is apparently there's a group of guys that are really good at playing video games, and they put out videos on YouTube of themselves playing the games and talking about the games.
Right.
And my kids actually go on YouTube and find these and watch them, and they learn things about how those games are played. Yeah, right. And then it becomes this thing with their friends. Oh, did you see the Ozcast playing Minecraft? And they did this section and one. So it's like, I sort of see that.
Yeah, very few people, even though the Atari 2600 and then eventually the 5200, came out. I had the 2600 and I had like virtually every game you can have with that thing, and then they upgraded it to the 5200, and I'm like, why? Why did you do that? I kept playing these games. So but I was one of those nerdy, post-teens at this point. I just liked video games, but I was one of the few who had a home system. And I remember at the time they had Super System. I think it was able to coordinate a lot of different kinds of games. But the thing I remember is it was still to the point of video games not being something you just dedicated your life to. It was something you did when you were with the guys in an arcade or at whatever you fill a movie theater. They started to have things like Pac-Man and all those things at the movie theater, Galaxia.
Right.
All these great games, Asteroids. Asteroids is one of the more primal games. But those were things. It was an outside kind of thing. But this speaks to what your kids are going through now. Speaks to really where everything is at. We didn't have that kind of distraction. It wasn't. This isn't how we communicated.
Right.
We had some of the same assets. We just didn't communicate in the same way. Now it's all social media. The internet and computer changed everything. That's really the basis of this.
Yeah, because it's not so much anymore that there's an album that comes out. They get the album and listen to the whole album.
Right.
It's just this song is here and that song's there, and somebody's stream that one. And
what were our options? Exactly. Yeah. And then they're like, oh wow, can you play me something? No, we had to. Well, the equivalent of that would be we go over each other's houses and listen to each other's music.
Right.
But you'd have to actually go to the other person's house.
Well, I could remember getting on my bicycle when I was 14 and driving to the store because there was a Beatles album that I knew came out that day on my bicycle, buying it, and carrying it home in my arm and putting it on and playing it 20 times in a row.
And sitting in front of. By that point, I was like into audiophiles, into stereos, stereo sound, and I'd be sitting in front of a stereo. I may have a beer or something like that. Oh my God, did I say that? And I'd be sitting in front of like the stereo, and I'd be like listening to this album unfold. And just the concept of going from here to there, it was like a communication. It was a different kind of animal. I mean, no matter what it was, it could be a singer-songwriter, it could be the new Asia album, which I loved when that thing came out. I shouldn't have said that. But there were things like, there was a ritual, there was all of that stuff that the kids now, it's sort of, music it's not so much that it's disposable, it's more that it's functional.
Right.
And it's more about the fashion, and it's more about what your friends like.
And the dancing,
Yeah, and dancing. Right now, I mean, the funny thing is that I know so many, everybody's gravitating, if you're a certain age and under, or a certain age and a little over, and you're making music, it's almost like it's obligatory. You're going to have some beats, and you're going to have loops and all that. And which era would we rather have lived in? I'm not really sure. I kind of like the era I lived in, but on the other hand, I kind of do envy the kids a lot. They have a lot of fun with a lot of the stuff that they have.
For sure, yeah.
All right. Well,
I certainly had fun with what I did.
I know. It's all sort of like...
It's all relative.
It's all relative. And however, when I come back... I wonder what, you look 10, 20 years from now, whatever. I shouldn't be saying I'm going to come back 10, 20 years from now. But if one were to come back and they were to they were to like look at whatever music is going to be down the pike, I'll bet you it's even more, you know, I don't want to say disposable, but more like in the background and functional and whatever, because there's going to be so much engaging your attention. Video games like now, and real sports and actually playing sports, things like that. I'm just wondering what it's going to be like in the future. What music is really headed towards, given how it's integrated with social media, given how it's integrated its usages in movies and stuff like that.
Right.
You know. All right. I guess we've talked this to death. So. Any closing thoughts? These are one of the last Fairfield 2.0 episodes.
Oh.
I really appreciate you both being on for this.
Interesting little thing you mentioned just about how it is nowadays, you know, in terms of social media, this, that, and the other and everything. And when I think back to when I started playing, you know, which was basically during the British invasion phenomena, is that there was an incredible explosion of interest in people wanting to play music. Not just listen to it, but play it. You know, the musical instrument manufacturers couldn't keep up with the demand. Everybody was buying a guitar or you know, a set of drums or singing or whatever. And there was in Cedar Rapids, there were 1 million, you know, garage bands and basement bands and a lot. And you know, there were battles of the bands on Sunday afternoons at the dance halls and things like that. And it was the main thing was it was a participatory phenomena, and everybody was in on it. Now, 90% or 99% of everybody didn't stick with it much beyond a year or two after that. But the point was is that for a while there, everybody was in on the phenomena of wanting to be doing it.
Yeah, and on the West Coast, I certainly didn't live or grow up there, but it was everybody was in a surf band.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was a ritual.
Same
it was
thing.
a ritual of growing up, just as I think it still is now. I think that every, I can maybe only talk about maybe males, adolescents. It seems like there is a period where you want to learn some musical instrument because it's a part of the bonding process with a few other guys. It's something else you can play. And then the thing that breaks my heart, speaking of the same subject, the thing that breaks my heart a little bit is that, to your point, the gravitation to, instead of learning the instrument, these days, for a while, it was going towards learning how to play Guitar Hero and learning how to play Rock Band.
Or how to sample.
Or how to sample. Well, sample is a whole other issue.
Well, it is
total mixed
interesting.
feelings
I had a family acquaintance of ours who has a son who's, I think last year was maybe 14, and they said, you know, he's shown interest in learning to play guitar. Would you give him some lessons? I said, yeah, I'll give him 2 or 3 lessons. I used to teach more often, but not so much. But since you guys are friendly, I'll give him some lessons. So I gave him 2 or 3 lessons, showing him how to finger and play chords and some progressions and things like that. And then finally got to the point where I felt like he was learning the chords and stuff. I said, well, why don't you pick a tune or 2 and I'll see if I can learn it for you and teach you how to play, and you'll get an idea how to play along with records, and you can learn a lot on your own that way. So what does he pick? Rolling Stone songs. It's like, wow.
Actually, there was a moment of relief from that.
That's great. I thought, gee, I wonder.
That's when I'll make one last. We're running out of time here. We've got to hear you play, sir.
Sure, I'd love to play a song.
But I absolutely, and the thing I wanted to bring up was that the kids these days, they're phenomenal. I mean, what's amazing is they pick up guitar, and I'll speak for my godson Willie. Hey, Willie, you're never going to watch this show, but hi. Willie Mosto, he's an amazing guitar player. He came here to Fairfield for about a month, and he immediately jumped Jimmy Moore. He jumped on stage with Jimmy Moore, I think Johnny Cohen, the Hurlin brothers, and he instantly was able to integrate like that, and he knew that they were doing this jazz, the Medeski Martin and Woodstock. And he was able to integrate with that. And I said, how did you do it? It's like, I listen to those records, I know what to do in that. And he was really an amazing player at like 15, 16, 17. He came here when he was 18. But still, he really had this ear for music. He was able to pick up a guitar and play it. There was a kid I was helping out in the beginning when I first got here. He was an amazing guitar player. There are all sorts of. Johnny Cohen. Johnny Cohen is like instantly like Mr. Jazzman, and then if you wanted him to play some punk, he could go right into that.
Right.
The Hurlin brothers.
Eric Hurlin.
Eric. Every single person says it. It's like
I could tell you a story
Hurlin.
about Eric, but he was learning bass with Jimmy Moore. And I was putting together something to play at the student union basement, some show that was going on there, and I needed a bass player. And so Jimmy said, you got to use Eric. He's learning. He's getting really good. And I said, okay, have him come over. So he did his first live show with me, and I don't know, he must have been 17 or something at the time, and it was really great. He's just a really great bass player, and then suddenly I hear he's playing his amazing jazz piano.
And then I heard him play, and I've heard him play. He actually lived at my house for a while. I'd hear him all the time playing and noodling on guitar too. Give him my electric guitar for a little bit. I just think it's an amazing thing. It is an interesting time. I think it's beyond Fairfield. I think it's that we have so much talent. You have so much musical talent in the world right now, young talents. Like, what do you do with that?
Yeah.
I mean, there isn't even an Andy Warhol equation for this now. It's no more 15 minutes. What is it?
Yeah,
Not only that, but the state of the art has advanced and advanced and advanced. So
because of technology.
Yeah, and now there's a point of reference that's so far beyond what it might have been 10, 20, 30 years ago or whatever that people aspire towards.
Yeah.
It is
phenomenal.
It is cool that anybody, any kid who's learning or who's pretty good can make his own YouTube video and put it up, and tell all his friends, and suddenly, maybe have 10,000 hits.
That's right. And then not only that, but also have, the self-esteem that comes from that.
Yeah.
That's also one of the backbones that you need in order to progress as far as like, hey, I'm feeling good about this, and then you keep writing, you keep getting better. YouTube to me feels like a tool for kids to get better at what they do. Right. All the goofy, see all the goofy videos that are on there. It's like, this is the learning process. Right. We don't necessarily have to be looking at this. We'll let them do their thing. Yeah, it really is an amazing time we live in. So this 30 years coming, I wonder what music is going to be like in 20, 30 years.
Yes, yeah.
It will be interesting to see this generation and their kids.
Yes.
What will happen from there. All right, now we really do have to pull the plug. You are amazing, sir. Mr. Will Gunn.
Oh.
Mr. Frank Cenatori, who we're going to be hearing a couple songs from, a song or two, possibly going to talk a minute or two, maybe. And I would invite you back, except we're kind of like, these are the last couple of episodes.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
But I'm really glad. And there's the bell, for whom the bell tolls.
Well, I always thought you should do these live at Cafe P, like in the evening, kind of like the Tonight Show or something.
Oh, I would love to do that. Jason has insisted, in fact, he wants to get away from his family and not have a home life. I want to thank, I'm going to, with these last few episodes, we'll pay extra special thanks and attention to Jason Strong, who's always been there for me, and for all the guests and all the people on the show. Thank you, Jason. You've really been great, and this has been a nice experience. It's been the origins of the show was introducing Fairfield to Fairfield. From Fairfield part was the hard part, because it was always about me, and I'm not from Fairfield, as one might see by the speed of my talk here.
Neither are many of us.
That's true. But I think the upgrade of this show is going to be more about Fairfield talking to Fairfield, like people who've actually been part of the community more. And I think what we're going to do, we'll let the cat out of the bag. I think what we're going to do is we're going to have people interviewing other people based on people have been living with each other in this community for a long time. They know issues and they know things that I can't come into the mix with. I can only look in as an observer, an interloper. All right, that's that. But thank you again for coming to this, one of the last shows here for 2.0.
My pleasure.
All right, and hang in there, Fairfield, because we have Frank Cenatori, who's going to be picking up his guitar and playing a couple of songs. Thanks again. Always a pleasure.
You're welcome. Thanks for doing it.
Oh, lucky Fairfield. We have Petula Clark on the phone with us. Petula Clark has had many, many, many hits, over the years. Downtown, I Know a Place, Don't Sleep in the Subway, Color My World, Oh My Gosh, My Gosh. We could keep going and going. But instead, let's actually get to the interview. She has a new album out, a really sweet new album called Lost in You. And let's welcome her to Fairfield and beyond. Hello, Petula. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. I'm up in the Alps as we speak, the French Alps. And it's very cold and wet up here. It's not very pretty at all at the moment.
Oh my God.
Still at least spring is here.
Spring is here, but is there any snow left?
It finally disappeared last week. But I don't know, we seem to be in the clouds here. Well, there you go.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Do you like to ski?
It can be good. It depends what kind of clouds we're talking about.
Oh, okay. Well, I was talking about the snow.
No. It's just raining, and I've been watching television. I've been watching stuff coming in from Madrid or live from Madrid, and the weather's beautiful there. And we're just like a stone's throw from Madrid, and we've got the bad weather.
Yeah.
It's just weather. Come on,
It's just weather. That's right.
Yeah.
It's not good. We're not going to let it color our world, you might say.
Oh, here we go.
Now you know the guy that's interviewing you.
It's going to be one of those, isn't it?
No. Hey, Petula, can we get a little history lesson before we dive into everything? Because you've been making music and you've been in entertainment for many years. In fact, you've been recording and you've had records, I guess, since, well, let's be real here, for many decades.
All right. Okay. Yeah, I did start very young, that's true. Yeah, I think I made my first record. I'm not quite sure. I'm very bad at anything to do with numbers. I think I must have been about 14 or something like that. And it was very different then to to making records today, of course. But, the result was pretty well the same.
Well, I'm not sure if, yeah, I know, it's sort of the romance has kind of gone. Now everybody makes records on their computer.
It's quite possible to do that. I mean, the album you just mentioned, the new one called Lost in You, we made it in a tiny, tiny studio at the bottom of the producer's garden. It was like a garden shed. And, of course, inside it's a state-of-the-art studio. But really, you don't need a lot of space. You do need some good equipment, and you need some good ears, and somebody who knows what they're doing with that equipment.
Right, and this album does sonically sound wonderful, and of course, it's a beautiful collection of new songs. This is the first collection you've had in a while, right? And the last one you did was the Rod McEwen album.
That's very true, yes. I did the one with Rod in Los Angeles, and this is, well, yes, you say it's new songs. Well, they're mostly new songs, but we've done one or two covers, including a rather surprising cover of Downtown.
Yes,
Which
it's a very emotional cover.
Well, it's totally different, when John. The name of the producer is John Williams, not your John Williams, may I say. This is the English John Williams. He said to me, because we started talking about covers, and he said, well, why don't we do Downtown? And I said, no. And then I sort of went away. I had to go to Paris to do a couple of things over there. I came back 2 days later and went back to the studio, back to the shed, and he said, well, sit down and have a listen to this. And he pressed the button, and there was this beautiful sort of, backing track with no melody on it. And I said, that's nice. What is it? He says, that's Downtown.
Uh-huh.
And I said, you are kidding, aren't you? And he said, go on, sing it. So I did. And, it was really like singing a new song. And heaven knows I've sung it a few times over the years. but this is really kind of nice. And we've done other covers, too. We've done John Lennon's Imagine and, a few other things.
Yeah, it was really, I was going to mention that, too, as far as Imagine. Imagine, of course, having the lyrics, just to be open to everything. Imagine this, imagine that. But you've been imagining and fulfilling a very, full career over the years. Can you go? How do you do it? How do you stay lively and wanting to? Keep creating? In other words, a lot of people might be tempted to just go off and do another thing at this point. But it keeps pulling you back, doesn't it?
Well, I'm not ready to grow radishes yet, if that's what you're trying to say.
In a roundabout way, yes.
Although looking at the weather outside, it might be a good day to start growing radishes. No. Why do I do it? How do I? Because I love it. That's why.
Yeah.
And I always have. I started very young. And there's a song on the album called Reflections, which actually mentions that whole thing that started for me when I was about 6 years old in Wales, and because I'm a half Welsh, and it's just gone on. It's my love of music, my love of performing, and to sound really corny, my love of an audience, of the public. That's what it's all about. That's the bottom line for me. Perhaps not for the people around me, because there's money in this and all that kind of thing. But I have never ever done this for money.
Yeah. And you're an international figure at this point. I mean, a lot of people we'd like to claim you, and of course Britain claims you, but you're really international. For instance, you had a hit single in Belgium just last year. with your French with your French project. What is you're aware of your global presence. Do you feel like you're just making music and you're putting it out, and whoever likes it likes it? You're not really targeting or marketing, I'm imagining, right?
Well, obviously when I record in French, and I over the years I've recorded many times in French.
Yes.
If I record in French, it's obviously being targeted at a French audience.
Right.
But yes, you're right. When you go in the studio, you go in to record something that you like, and you do your best with it and have some fun with it, hopefully. And after that, really, it's not in your hands anymore. It's out there, and then it's up to people to say whether they like it or not.
Right. Let me ask you, so one of the lyrics in Reflections you were talking, we just brought that up, Reflections, I traveled a long and winding road to all of life's directions, and now in the mirror I can see it all in these reflections. Obviously, that's true. You wrote that. But what is it? What are the particular things that come to you when you're thinking of your career? When you're looking at the highlights? What are some of the great highlights?
Well, first of all, I have to say that I'm not particularly nostalgic. So writing this, I wrote the lyrics for this particular song, Reflections. And once again, it was John's idea to take a piece of classical music. In this case, it was by a bloke by the name of Jean-Sebastian Bach, who's pretty good. And he said, well, write a personal lyric, write something about, I don't know, about you. And so I didn't really know how to do that. I don't look back and say, oh, those were the days and blah, blah, blah. But I decided to go back to Wales, to where it all started for me as a very small child, and it was an interesting experience for me. They're trying to talk me into writing a book at the moment, a sort of autobiographical thing, and I'm not crazy about the idea of it. But I suppose there comes a time in your life when you've got to sort of write it down before somebody else does it, and messes it up and gets it all wrong.
Right.
At least, I'll be getting it wrong, and from the horse's mouth, So I don't know if I've answered your question there.
Oh, no. Basically what I was wondering is there are so many highlights in your career, and writing the book will actually be one way to be pulling all these together for us to be looking at. But as you're looking in the mirror, you're looking at a lot of achievement and a lot of life. And, just some of the highlights. Well, for instance, Tony Hatch, your association with Tony Hatch all these years.
Yes. Well, Tony, of course. We had worked a little bit together before I recorded Downtown, which he wrote.
Right.
But then, of course, he just went on writing these fantastic songs for me. After Downtown, I Know a Place, Color My World, Don't Sleep in the Subway. One of my favorites, which is I Couldn't Live Without Your Love.
Yeah.
My Love. Well, it's a long, long list.
Yeah.
And he's about to be honored. He's about to be inducted, which is a funny word, inducted into the Hall of Fame for Songwriters. And I'm going to be there. And guess what? I'll probably be singing Downtown. We've known each other a long, long time, and he did great things for my career.
Right. Did he? What was his reaction to the new version of Downtown?
Do you know? I don't know. The fact that he hasn't said anything to me about it probably means he doesn't like it much.
Well, then I think, or he hasn't heard it yet, and then I think you should spring it on him on Songwriters Hall of Fame night.
Oh, that would be maybe pushing the envelope a bit too far.
All right, some of the let me also ask about some of these other songs from the new album Lost in You. What? Well, how about the title track? There are so many. I don't even know where to start here with some of these songs. Cut, Copy Me. And of course, Never Enough. One of the songs that you co-wrote here. What do you think when you're writing? What is your process? I want to get into your songwriting.
Well, I don't look on myself as a proper songwriter. I write songs sometimes, and it just has to come to me. I'm not the kind of person, who gets the phone call and say, write me a song, and right. I wouldn't know how to do that. But if it comes to me, then it comes very easily. You know, I sit down at the piano because I do music and lyrics usually, and it just comes. Where does it come from? That's the mystery that I don't think anybody can solve.
Right.
But it has to come from somewhere inside me, and that's really the only answer I can give you on that.
Right. Well, of course, you know. Well, with "You're the One," you co-wrote that with good old Tony Hatch.
Yes.
One of your big hits. Now, the other thing though is you wrote, and not many people may know this, but you wrote the lyrics on the path on the Path of Glory, the Harry Belafonte.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I did. I did. Well, that very much came from me. And, you know, the fact that I'm singing John Lennon's Imagine, you know, apart from the story, you know, about John and me, is that I am very much a pacifist, and I, you know, that's where I am. Maybe I'm naive, yes, probably yes, but that's how I feel, and that's what comes through when I write about anything.
Well, there's nothing
near that subject.
My feeling is there's nothing. My feeling is there's nothing wrong. In fact, there's something to be applauded about somebody who enjoys peace on the planet.
Yes, yes, but you know, when you look at the world, you think, well, maybe I'm just naive, you know, because not many other people seem to feel this way. Although the people that it's amazing how many people do feel that way. But
Yes.
we would all wish we would all get up and do something about it.
Yeah, and you know what I think deep down, honestly, Petula, between you and me and anybody who's listening right now and watching, I feel that most people, given a shot, given the opportunity, they really don't want to. They really don't want war. They really don't. They really love their peace, and it's just these silly things that we all get mixed up in that starts these major
Yeah.
problems. I know it's more complicated than that, but I think
it is complicated.
when it gets right down to it, I think the essence of what you were saying the essence of On the Path of Glory, I think is still true to this day.
It is, yes, it is, and probably always will be.
Now I have to throw out there. You have a big fan in a mutual friend. Richard Carpenter loves you, especially your composition "Here for You" from 1998.
Oh, yes. I went into the studio and recorded with Richard. I think Richard's still looking for another Karen Carpenter, and I don't think he'll ever find her. You know, Karen was totally unique. She also happened to be a friend, but, you know, you listen to that voice, and it's very, very special. Yeah, I went into the studio and recorded with Richard. He's a hard taskmaster, let me put it that way. and that's good, but I mean, he's perfectionist, gone way over, and that's probably why he made such perfect records with Karen.
Yeah, I agree with you totally. I think that about both points, about having made perfect records with Karen and about being quite the on point producer, I guess you could, and arranger.
Yeah, definitely.
Was it when you look at some of the records that you've done over the years? For instance, there was the one from the '90s that you did also. What are there a particular? I don't want you to name your favorite children, and yet I do. Or are there some favorites? Are there some
favorite children?
Are there some favorites songs that you've recorded over the years?
Oh, you're talking about the ones that I've written, or just in general?
In general, the ones you've recorded over the years.
Oh dear.
They could be from not just hits.
Is hard.
I know, not just hits. I mean, just things that you've recorded.
It's hard, honestly, because as you say, they are my children. You know, I wouldn't have recorded them if I hadn't loved them.
Yeah.
And I love them all. And I'm going off on tour in the UK at the end of this year, and I'm going to have to choose 23, 24 songs out of all those hundreds of songs that I've recorded, and I'm going to have to leave some of my children by the wayside, and it's very hard to choose. Maybe you could choose for me?
Well, you know what? It's really cool is that from this record, one of my favorites is Lost in You. I really love that.
Yeah, I do love that song. The first track we did for this new album is called Cut Copy Me, which you just mentioned, and I like that too. It was Cut Copy Me that inspired us to go on and make an album, because there was no master plan behind this album. When we also, by the way, didn't go in saying, let's do something contemporary. I wouldn't even know how to do that. I just go in and sing.
Right.
The songs, if you like, are more contemporary, but we didn't try to go back to the 60s. We didn't try to make me sound like somebody today. We just went in and had a good time in the studio. So, yeah, I agree, Lost in You is a wonderful song, but I think there are a few others that I like too.
Yeah, and especially from this album. I kind of focus on, this is the latest thing I've heard from you, of course, so this is the thing I'm focused on. But of course, Downtown, and when I worked on, we talked about it off camera, so to speak, when we talked about that collection. I got to work on that sweet, it was short, it was too short for my taste, but that sweet collection that I think is, it shows, that was a starting place for somebody. It was like a sampler for somebody to start getting into Petula Clark music.
Maybe, yes.
Yeah.
And, John Williams, I worked with around that time, and we got along very well. He and I are very good in the studio. But as I say, this was done in a small studio, including a window. My microphone, the vocal mic, was in front of a window, and I could look out and see birds and flowers and things. That doesn't happen very often in a recording studio.
It was a great, and for that reason, it was kind of an enlightening maybe experience, wasn't it?
I think it was, yes. And I was working with people that I didn't know. I didn't. They were young, and some of them not that experienced, and some of them were a little bit overawed, maybe working with me. But some of them couldn't have cared less, and all that was fine. It was just a great sort of family feeling, very organic.
Nice, very nice. And now, among the covers that you chose on this album, of course, there's the Gershwins. He loves and she loves, and that reflects. That goes way back. I guess you were brought up on Gershwin.
Yes, I was, and in my stage act, I do a couple of Gershwin songs. I don't do this one, incidentally, and which is why I wanted to record this one. Mm-hmm. And that's me, by the way, fumbling away on the piano on this track. Yeah, I don't know. There's something so sweet and simple about this song, and of course, Fred Astaire sang it with Audrey Hepburn in a movie, and I have such a love for Fred. I don't know. This song just means something to me.
Yeah, and Funny Face was wonderful. It was.
That's right.
Yeah, it was a wonderful movie. Love that.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the song that won't go away. As far as from the culture, and for very good reason, which is "Love Me Tender."
Oh, yes. Well, I have been doing that on stage for a while. I sit down on the piano and tell a story about Elvis, which is sort of amusing and true, may I say. And we thought, well, why not just put it down, And it's a very simple arrangement. We put some guitars on later on, and it just is what it is. And I sing the song pretty well all the way through. I didn't know at the time that it was, in fact, it's a very old song. It's from the American Civil War, and there's something very poignant about that.
Yeah, the simplicity of it.
Yeah,
especially. And then, well, you pointed to, you just said, you told a story about Elvis. Can you share that story with us?
Well, we just mentioned Karen Carpenter. She was in town. I was in Vegas working, of course, and I suppose I must have had a night off. And so we said, well, why don't we go out on the town? And it's just a girly night out. And so, well, what shall we do? And I said, well, let's go and see Elvis. He's on at the Hilton, and neither of us had seen him. Neither of us had met him. So off we go, and he introduced us to the audience because he knew we were in. Okay, very nice. And then we were invited back to his dressing room. Huge dressing room, of course, with a big sitting room with one or two people from, I guess they were from Nashville, because they're all talking about that, I'm sorry about that.
No.
And then Elvis,
humor's allowed.
Thank you. Elvis comes out of his dressing area. Looking so stunning. This was his first time in Vegas. You know, he was after his sort of break, and he was looking delicious. And he looked at us, and he was obviously very impressed with us. And so, you know, we just got chatting, and we had a glass of wine, and I could feel the atmosphere getting rather sort of over-friendly, and the people in the sitting room had disappeared. So it was just Elvis, Karen, and me. And I thought, maybe I should get Karen out of this situation, because she was, you know, a little bit naive, and, you know, and I'd sort of been around a lot and all that, you know, all that rubbish. And I turned into Mary Poppins and said to Karen, well, it's getting late, Karen, we should go. She said, what? I said, well, you know, you've got that thing in the morning. And she said, what thing? And I said, we really have to go, Elvis. You know, thank you so much. Thank you for the show, the glass of wine. It was wonderful. Good night. And Elvis just stood there totally flabbergasted and amused, may I say. And
he knew you caught on, I'm imagining.
Yeah, well, I had caught on, because he had plans for us. And I saw him a few times after that, and he never forgot our first meeting. Never forgot that.
Wow, that story, you know, in real life, that story could have gone any number of ways.
All kinds of ways. Who knows?
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And can I ask you to share one more thing with us, which is very important? I ask this of every artist, which is, and you've had an amazing career and just a fabulous history. What advice do you have for new artists?
Oh, dear. I have to tell you, this is not the first time I've been asked this. I wouldn't know how to advise anybody. You know, half the time I don't know what I'm doing anyway. So, you know, it's such a personal thing. I think the only thing I could say is find out about yourself. Don't copy other people. And I know it's difficult, particularly these days where, you know, you have to be on and right immediately. I'm talking about, you know, the shows on television, like, you know, America's Got Talent, all those things. You have to be right on it right away. And that's a really scary thing, because, you know, when I started out, you could learn how to do it over time, and you weren't being judged like on a one-off situation. So it's important, if you can, to try and find out find your own voice. Don't copy anybody else. Let someone copy you.
That's really wonderful advice. That's very sweet advice. And then I would be remiss. It would be remiss if I did not ask you about all these years later. You did something very challenging to the I guess the sensitivities of a certain Chrysler in 1968, when there was just a mere beautiful hand touch between you and Harry Belafonte.
Yeah.
And now we have obviously we've had a black president for the longest time.
Well, there you go. I mean, that's I think that's wonderful and amazing, and, you know, how times have changed. You know, when the Harry Belafonte episode happened, which to me was, you know, like a storm in a teacup. Don't forget that I was English coming into America, and I was coming in right in the middle of the civil rights movement that was very, very hot at that particular time. So I stepped right into it. But, you know, I'm glad. I'm glad it happened.
Yeah. Oh, not only that, but I mean, look at, here we are, it's 2013, and it seems to me that, with the exception of some of what I would call radical thinking people, you don't really have any concern. It doesn't seem like that's a concern at all. As I said, we have a black president. I think it seems like with all of the efforts that people have done over the years, and even with no efforts, with just it naturally taking place, it just seems like we've come a long way.
We have come a long way. You know, the world has changed enormously. And, you know, I think one of the reasons why I love being in this business, going back to one of the questions you asked me at the beginning of why, I'm still doing this, is because it's multiracial and there don't seem to be any barriers, no language barriers. All kinds of music all mixing in together, and it's a wonderful thing. Maybe we're a little spoiled in that way, but I'm glad I'm in this business.
That's beautiful, very beautiful. And you know what? The business is glad that you're in it. You're getting a tribute, apparently, a Grammy Museum tribute in L.A.
Well, let's talk about it. Yes, I don't have any plans to get to Los Angeles where it will happen, but that would be fantastic, of course.
and hopefully, not only will it happen, but it'll be a beautiful thing for you. Hopefully it'll be one of the highlights that you'll be reflecting on, you might say. I want to thank you very, very much for all your time, Petula. As I said, I listened to your music, and I hate to say it like this, but growing up, and I loved the contribution your music made to my life. I appreciate it, and thank you.
Well, that's a lovely thing to say. Thank you.
All right. So all of the best, Petula, and maybe let's do this again come your next album, which should be next year, right?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe. Who knows?
All right. All the best, and this has been really, really sweet. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Bye, Petula.
Hi, I'm Frank Cenatori, and going to play a song here for you today that I wrote a little while back for one of the bands that I played in, and it's called There's Love All Around. It's just a song about moving on. When you travel lightly, you travel with God's speed. Leave your troubles behind you, there's nothing else you need. Burn the bridges behind you, and don't look back. Let nothing remind you, it's all in the past. Keep on moving, daddy, moving straight ahead. Let your mind be easy, no matter what's been said. Desire ships are sinking, some fast, others slow. What's in your heart, they'll never know. They'll never know. All we need to do is just move along and keep singing our own song. All we need to do is just let it be. Let it be, and we're free. When your soul is free, no one can do you wrong. When your soul is free, you keep on getting strong. Just keep on getting higher and never look down. Just keep on behind you. There's love all